Nandana Bhaja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Banachari Yamuna Tira Banachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Paravajagacharya Stotra Sata Shri Mata's Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON Vivekananda Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Paravajagacharya Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai Ananta Gauri Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Shri Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Sekaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasili Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gogopinath Shamakunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Navadvip Mayapur Dham Ki Jai Ganga Jamuna Mai Ki Jai Tulasi Devi Maharani Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glorious to the assembled devotees, all glorious to the assembled devotees, all glorious to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd Canto, Chapter 32, text number 29. Yathā mahān ahaṁ-rūpas tri-vṛt pañca-vidhaḥ sva-rāṭ ekādaśa-vidhas tasya vapur aṇḍaṁ jagad yathā yathā mahān ahaṁ-rūpas yathā mahān ahaṁ-rūpas tri-vṛt pañca-vidhaḥ sva-rāṭ tri-vṛt pañca-vidhaḥ sva-rāṭ ekādaśa-vidhas tasya ekādaśa-vidhas tasya vapur aṇḍaṁ jagad yataḥ vapur aṇḍaṁ jagad yataḥ yathā mahān ahaṁ-rūpas tri-vṛt pañca-vidhaḥ sva-rāṭ ekādaśa-vidhas tasya vapur aṇḍaṁ jagad yataḥ. Others, please. Vaishnavis. Yathā, as. Mahān, the mahat-tattva. Ahaṁ-rūpaḥ, the false ego. Tri-vṛt, the three modes of material nature. Pañca-vidhaḥ, the five material elements. Sva-rāṭ, the individual consciousness. Ekādaśa-vidhas, the 11 senses. Tasya, of the living entity. Vapur, the material body. aṇḍaṁ, the brahmāṇḍa. Jagat, the universe. Yathā, from which or from whom. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. From the total energy, the mahat-tattva, I have manifested the false ego, the three modes of material nature, the five material elements, the individual consciousness, the 11 senses, and the material body. Similarly, the entire universe has come from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport. The Supreme Lord is described as mahat-pada, which means that the total material energy, known as the mahat-tattva, is lying at His lotus feet. The origin of the total energy of the cosmic manifestation is the mahat-tattva. From the mahat-tattva, all other 24 divisions have sprung, namely the 11 senses, including the mind, the 5 sense objects, the 5 material elements, and then consciousness, intelligence, and false ego. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the cause of the mahat-tattva, and therefore, in one sense, because everything is an emanation from the Supreme Lord, there is no difference between the Lord and the cosmic manifestation. But at the same time, the cosmic manifestation is different from the Lord. The word Svarāṭ is very significant here. Svarāṭ means independent. The Supreme Lord is independent, and the individual soul is also independent. Although there is no comparison between the two qualities of independence, the living entity is minutely independent, and the Supreme Lord is fully independent. As the individual soul has a material body made of 5 elements and the senses, the Supreme Independent Lord similarly has the gigantic body of the universe. The individual body is temporary. Similarly, the entire universe, which is considered to be the body of the Supreme Lord, is also temporary. And both the individual and universal bodies are products of the mahat-tattva. One has to understand the differences with intelligence. Everyone knows that his material body has developed from a spiritual spark, and similarly, the universal body has developed from the supreme spark, Supersoul. As the individual body develops from the individual soul, the gigantic body of the universe develops from the Supreme Soul. Just as the individual soul has consciousness, the Supreme Soul is also conscious. But although there is a similarity between the consciousness of the Supreme Soul and the consciousness of the individual soul's consciousness is limited, whereas the consciousness of the Supreme Soul is unlimited. This is described in Bhagavad-gītā chapter 13, text 3, Kṣetra-jñaṁ chapimam vidhi. The Supersoul is present in every field of activity, just as the individual soul is present in the individual body. Both of them are conscious. The difference is that the individual soul is conscious of the individual body only, whereas the Supersoul is conscious of the total number of individual bodies. Om Gana Tamiram Dasha Jananjana Shalakaya Chakshurna Militamyena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitamyena Bhutale Swayam-rūpa-gadāmayam Dadapti Swaparantikam. So this is Lord Kapila here speaking to his mother Devahuti, and he's speaking as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's not just like her guru. He's saying here, from the total energy, the mahat-tattva, I have manifested the false ego. So he's speaking as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's the first point I wanted to bring up. Then in the purport, Prabhupada says the Supreme Lord is described as mahat-pada, which means that the total material energy, known as the mahat-tattva, that includes total material energy, means not just this universe. It's talking about the mahat-tattva is all the universes. Okay? And Prabhupada has said on different occasions, there are millions and trillions of universes. For some reason he liked to skip billions, but he would say millions and trillions of universes. Sometimes he would say unlimited universes. So that's a lot. And they're big. This is actually the smallest. But, so that's very, we're talking about something very, very big now, the total material energy. And it says here, they are lying at his lotus feet. So, which raises the question, what is Krishna's shoe size? How about that? I mean, the total material energy, known as the mahat-tattva, is lying at his lotus feet. He must have it. It cannot be measured. So, anyway, I'm going to read something that hopefully will shed a little bit of light on this subject, but only a little bit. So this is from a book I'm reading now, Vedic Cosmography and Astronomy. It was written by Bhrgupati Prabhu, and it was published by the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust. It's on the Veda base, okay, so it's a bona fide book. And he says here, modern physics and astronomy began with the idea that matter is made of teeny bits of substance, each of which has a location in three-dimensional space. According to this idea, which was strongly developed by Descartes and Newton, three-dimensional space can be seen as an absolute, pre-existing container in which all material events take place. This idea is quite consistent with the picture of the world provided by our own senses, and it tends to provide an unquestioned background for all our thinking. However, many cultures have maintained quite different ideas about the nature of space, and this is also true of the Vedic culture. So we're talking about a different kind of space. He goes on. To understand the Vedic conception of space, it is necessary to consider the position of Krishna as the absolute cause of all causes. And then he quotes some verses from the Brahma Samhita. One of them states, all the universes exist in him, and he is present in his fullness in every one of the atoms that are scattered throughout the universe at one and the same time. So Krishna's space is different. Let's see if he says anything. The most fundamental feature of the Vedic idea of space is that many more things can be brought close together in this space than the geometric rules of three-dimensional space allow. Anyway, as I said, I'm not going to read a lot. There's a whole section here, but I just wanted to, this is like an appetizer, that we're dealing with a different kind of space. Three-dimensional space doesn't cut the mustard when coming to reading the Srimad Bhagavatam, trying to understand. So if you when you're reading the Bhagavatam or the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Vedic literature, if you attach to this idea that, well, the only kind of space there could possibly be is three-dimensional space, you're going to have a hard time. You're going to experience a lot of cognitive dissonance. You need to kind of get a different understanding. And I would recommend anybody who's interested in really kind of getting a better understanding of the kind of space that's being implicit. It's not implicit within the Vedic literature. You can read this. It's on the Veda base, as I said. It's Vedic Cosmography and Astronomy, and you can find it under the heading of other books by devotees. So you can read more about that. But, yeah. Okay, so then Prabhupada goes on to talk about in the purport about from the mahat-tattva, all the 24 divisions have sprung. And he describes what this is. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the cause of the mahat-tattva, and therefore, in one sense, because everything is an emanation from the Supreme Lord, there is no difference between the Lord and the cosmic manifestation. But at the same time, the cosmic manifestation is different from the Lord. So that's not hard to understand. Just like, for instance, yesterday, Judakarma gave class, Judakarma Prabhu. So he wrote a book, Forbidden Archaeology, Hidden History of the Human Race. Very wonderful book. So there's a sense in which it's not different from him, right? It's his book. He wrote it. When you read that, you're associating with his intellect and his personality to a certain extent, etc., like that. But at the same time, it's not him. So, Prabhupada would give similar examples to that. It's achincha beta abeta tattva, simultaneously one with but different from. Okay, so then he goes on. He says, the word sva-rāṭ is very significant here. Sva-rāṭ means independent. The Supreme Lord is independent, and the individual soul is also independent. Although there is no comparison between the two qualities of independence, the living entity is minutely independent, and the Supreme Lord is fully independent. And now he's going to, of course, there's so many different aspects to how Krishna is fully independent. Prabhupada's going to be dealing with one specific one here in this purport. And he goes into that in the next sense. He says, as the individual soul has a material body made of 5 elements and the senses, the Supreme Independent Lord similarly has a gigantic body of the universe. Now this is not his eternal, Satchidananda Vigraha that's being referred to here. But it's an interesting analogy. The individual body is temporary. Similarly, the entire universe, which is considered to be the body of the Supreme Lord, is also temporary. So it's his body, but once again, it's not his eternal spiritual form. It says, and both the individual and universal bodies are products of the mahat-tattva. One has to understand the differences with intelligence. Then Prabhupada goes on to elaborate upon that. I'll read a little bit more. Everyone knows the material body has developed from a spiritual spark, and similarly the universal body has developed from the supreme spark, Supersoul. As the individual body develops from the individual soul, the gigantic body of the universe develops from the Supreme Soul. Now the difference, Prabhupada points out, is that whereas the consciousness of the individual is limited to their one body, but the consciousness of the Supreme Soul is conscious of the total number of individual bodies. So that's a pretty phenomenal difference if you think about it, in terms of the independence. We are conscious to a limited extent of what's going on within our own body, and we're not really that very conscious. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. The human body has different systems, that cause it and that work together to maintain the overall health and function. So I'm just going to give you a rundown here. There's the nervous system. That's a system that controls and coordinates the body's functions, including movement, sensation, and cognition. Circulatory system. Actually, I won't read the description. Everybody kind of knows. Respiratory system, digestive system, endocrine system, immune system, muscular system, skeletal system, urinary system, or the renal system. Here's one I never even heard about before. Integumentary system, lymphatic system. So, they're all going on. These are all very complex systems, and they're all, working together to maintain the health of the body. Most people don't even know they have them. What to speak of how they work? What to speak of, are they in control of them? We're not. Our position is, and this is like, getting on to this point of how different our independence is from Krishna. We're just like a prisoner in a cell. A prisoner in a cell, he doesn't own that cell. He's not controlling anything in that cell. He doesn't know how the electricity is, if there is electricity in a cell, or how the toilet's flushing, or how the water is running, or whatever. It's all, he's just happened to be, he's in it, he's inhabiting it. See, so that's for most people. That's our position. We're just inhabiting these bodies, but it's like the tenant and the landlord. We're the tenant, but we are not the landlord. There's so much stuff going on, as I just read, within our body that's way beyond our comprehension. Most people, as I said, most people aren't even aware of all these things. What to speak of are they in control? We're not. But Krishna, as mentioned here, he's the Supersoul. He's conscious of the total number of individual bodies. And it's more than just like in a prison cell, maybe they have some camera and they can see what the prisoner's doing at every moment. Not maybe, they do. But it's more than just that Krishna's aware of what's going on within our body, and with our minds for that matter as well. He's controlling it. He's totally in control of the whole thing. So, that's like, wow, some really high level independence, compared to our independence. So there's a big difference between Krishna and us, and sometimes it's a good idea to stop and, think about it. Now, there is a sense, we heard on Sunday, that which, is saying here that Krishna's fully independent, but he gives up that full independence. Not gives up, he allows it to, he relaxes it sometimes. We heard Sunday about how if a devotee loves him enough, then Krishna will become subservient to that devotee. Prabhupada gave the example of Prime Minister of England at what time, Gladstone. He was in his office and somebody came to see him, and the secretary said, okay, you'll have to wait because the Prime Minister's busy at the moment. And so the person said, okay. So he sat and he waited 10, 15, 20 minutes, half hour, 45 minutes passed. Finally, he got a little, because he had an appointment, so he said, let me just go up to the door there and see what's going on. What's Prime Minister Gladstone doing? So he peeked through the keyhole, or he opened the door a little bit, and the Prime Minister was playing horseyback with his grandson. So, Prabhupada gave that as an example of how, if there's enough love there, Krishna becomes subservient to the devotee. He allows Mother Yasoda to tie him up, etc. So that's the one exception to how, Krishna's independence. He's still independent, but he independently does that. He relaxes that and allows himself to be controlled by the devotee if there's that loving relationship there. So Krishna, so another aspect of his independence is that Krishna has no problems. We have expressions, you got to learn to live with it. But there's nothing Krishna has to learn to live with. He has no problems. We hear how we have to get old, sick, and die. Because there's no have-tos for Krishna. He has no, he doesn't have to anything, right? And another point is that, but we do have problems, right? Well, actually, I'll take that back. Krishna has a problem. We're his problem. We're his problem. Krishna is not happy that we're here in this material world. He's not happy about that. So that's Krishna's problem. And we are in a position to make a choice whether we want to become remain part of Krishna's problem, or become part of the solution to Krishna's problem. That's what we're in a position to do, So if we make the decision to become part of the solution to Krishna's problem, which means engaging in devotional service, then we're simultaneously solving Krishna's problem, and we're actually solving our own problem. So it's like a win-win. When a living entity, or if somebody decides to engage in devotional service, you could say Krishna wins because he's not happy to see us here, and we win. So it's win-win. If we decide, no, I don't want to become part of the solution to the problem, I'll remain neutral. Well, actually you can't. According to the Bhagavad-gītā, there's no remaining neutral. There's that verse in the 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad-gītā goes, Nahi kaścit cānamapi jatu tishtati akarmakrit karyate hi avasha karma sarva prakriti jaiguna, that all men are forced to act helplessly according to the impulses born of the 3 modes of material nature. No one can refrain from doing something, not even for a moment. And in the purport, Prabhupada says, unless one engages in the good works of Krishna consciousness, in other words, devotional service, he'll be forced to act according to the dictates of the material modes of nature. So there's no neutral. You can't take the position, well, I don't want to engage in devotional service, but I don't want to get in Maya. No. It's one or the other. Either you make that choice, or you're going to be in Maya. It's just like I've given this example many times, but I'll just quickly give it again. If you go to Mayapur and you go in the Ganges, when you jump in the Ganges, if you think, I'm just going to jump in the Ganges and I'm going to tread water and I'll stay in the same place. No, you won't. When you jump in the Ganges, unless you decide, I'm swimming upstream until I get to that branch there or that rock, and then then I can relax. No, you're going downstream. If you just jump in the Ganges and you just tread water, the current will take you downstream. So it's the exact same thing. You see? If we don't make a decision, we have to make a choice. I'm becoming part of the solution. I'm engaging in devotional service, right? Then you're going upstream. That's like the person swimming upstream. And it's even better because like in that example, in that analogy, when you're swimming upstream, if you relax at some moment, then you start going downstream. But once you start, once you start trying, once you start engaging in devotional service, Krishna's got your back. As long as you keep trying, that kuntaya pratijanahi name bhakta pranashati. Krishna says, tells Arjuna, declare boldly, my devotee never perishes. See, so once you start engaging in devotional service and you're trying, even if even the current gets stronger or you get tired or whatever, as long as you keep trying, Krishna's there. He's not going to let you get swept away downstream. So that's a really important thing. And and even be honest with you, even if you do kind of stop trying, temporarily, Krishna still, if you've been very sincere, Krishna, he kind of rescues you. I had an experience 25 years ago. I was at the airport, Terminal 4, that day I decided, okay, I'm trying to have a really good day. I got up early, I chanted all my rounds, I read and everything, didn't overeat, did everything right. Got out there and I started, okay, I'm going to really do good here, And it was a tough terminal, a lot of business people, Terminal 4. So I was trying and nobody was, stopping. Nobody was even, I couldn't even get close to distributing a book. And, it's kind of got to me after 15, 20 minutes, half hour, 45 minutes, like I lost my enthusiasm. I got demoralized. And I said, okay, that's it, I can't. I've had it. So I had the books on on the floor there, and I packed them back up on the cart, and I started wheeling the cart out, to go. I was going to go to the van and have a nap, I gave up. So I'm pushing, wheeling the cart out, and just before I was going to go through security, that's like the point of no return. Once you go through security, then you got to go through a whole thing to get back in again. So just before I was going to go through security, I see somebody coming in, because it was like two-way traffic, and I looked and okay, anyway, they look like maybe somebody's nice, so I'll try them. And I tried them, and I, stopped them, and they did stop, and I handed them the book, I did my little sales pitch, and I asked for a donation, and they took the book and they gave a nice donation. And I thought, oh, okay, well, anyway, I'm still going. I'm fried. I'm out of here. So I just, pushed another couple steps, and I saw another person come in. And then I thought, well, I probably should try this person. So same thing, I stopped them. They took the book, and they also gave a nice donation. I said, well, I'm still going, So I went a little bit further, and then there was another person, and the same thing. I said, well, okay, I've got to stop them too. So I tried them, did my sales pitch, and they took the book, and they also gave a donation, nice donation. And I thought, oh, okay, Krishna, you got me. So you got me, okay, you win. So I turned around, went back, and I went back to the same spot, and put the books off the cart and started approaching everybody, and the rest of the day was bliss. Really, it was like a very powerful experience for me because it went from total, hellish, and it just, I guess I passed the test. I was stopping the businessmen. They were, giving nice donations, which was very hard, very unusual, and I had a big day. So, and I was, not only that, but as I was doing it, it wasn't just the result. I was chanting in between people, and I was experiencing a higher taste. I was experiencing a taste chanting, and then I would stop the people, they'd take the books and give nice donations, and it was like, night and day. And it really made me realize, wow, how Krishna really kind of, Kunteya pratijanahi name bhakta pranashati. I actually gave up, but Krishna was, I guess on the whole, Krishna perceived it as, okay, you're trying, you're being sincere, so I'm going to help you out here. So it was a really far-out experience. So, Krishna consciousness, and it works. It works on paper, and it works in practice. I'll read a couple excerpts from a couple of purports of Prabhupada. This is, you just heard my description of how it works in practice. This is, let's see if I can find, okay, here we go. This is from the 13th chapter. Prabhupada says, "The fact is that every individual living entity is eternally part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, and both of them are very intimately related as friends. But the living entity has the tendency to reject the sanction of the Supreme Lord and act independently in an attempt to dominate nature. And because he has this tendency, he is called the marginal energy of the Supreme Lord. The living entity can be situated in either the material energy or in the spiritual energy. As long as he is conditioned by the material energy, the Supreme Lord, as his friend, the Supersoul, stays with him just to get him to return to the spiritual energy." And I'm going to read another one after this that elaborates upon that. This is very encouraging. The Supreme Lord, as his friend, the Supersoul, stays with him just to get him to return to the spiritual energy. The Lord is always eager to take him back to the spiritual energy. But due to his minute independence, the individual entity is continually rejecting the association of spiritual light. So that's what we have to stop doing. We have to stop continually rejecting the association of spiritual light, which means we have to stop not following the instructions of the spiritual master. That's my paraphrase on that. That's what I think that is referring to. Goes on, this misuse of independence is the cause of his material strife in the conditioned nature. The Lord, therefore, is always giving instruction from within and from without. From without, he gives instructions as stated in the Bhagavad-gītā, and from within, he tries to convince the living entity that his material activities in the material field are not conducive to real happiness. Quotation mark. "Just give it up and turn your faith towards me, then you will be happy," end quote. He says, thus, the intelligent person who places his faith in the Paramatma, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead, begins to advance toward a blissful eternal life of knowledge. See, so, Krishna is trying to help us. He's trying to help us. But I've given this example before. Well, I didn't. It's Prabhupada's example. It's actually Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj's example. And Prabhupada would mention it in a few classes. He gave that if somebody falls into a well, and usually when in India they have wells, and sometimes they stop using them and they get covered over, and you can be walking through a field and whoop, next thing you know, you're 10, 15 feet down. If you're still alive, if you're lucky enough to still be alive, but you're down 10, 15 feet in a well in a big empty field. So a person could yell out for help, and if he's fortunate and somebody comes along, hears him yelling and comes along and says, "Okay, yeah, I'll help you out. I'll throw you this rope, just tie it around your waist, and I'll pull you out." And the person goes, he's been yelling for help, for 10, 15 minutes, half hour, whatever. And he goes, "Well, I can't do that, but help me, get me out." No, you got to do that. You got to do that much. That person who fell in the well, he's got to do that much. The other fellow will pull him out of the well, but he's got to take that rope and tie it around his waist. See? So it's like that with us too. Krishna, we've just heard how Krishna is trying to get us out of here, but we have to cooperate, and that cooperation comes in the form of we have to follow the instructions of the spiritual master. If we're not prepared to do that, then we're just like that person who's in the well crying, "Help, help, help," and just the person throws in the rope and he's not willing to tie it around his waist. He's going to stay there. Here's another one. This is even kind of more, takes it to a greater degree than the previous one. This is from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 8th Canto, Chapter 3, Text 17. Purport. Only Krishna can deliver us from this material existence. Indeed, he's always trying to deliver us. He is within our hearts and is not at all inattentive. His only aim is to deliver us from material life. It is not that he becomes attentive to us only when we offer prayers to him. Even before we offer our prayers, he incessantly tries to deliver us. Now that's pretty amazing. It's not that he becomes attentive to us only when we offer prayers to him. Even before we offer our prayers, even before we're sincere, Krishna's thinking, he's scheming. He's kind of trying to figure out, how can I deliver this person? Even before we offer prayers to him, he incessantly tries to deliver us. He is never lazy in regard to our deliverance. So, it goes on. It is the causeless mercy of the Supreme Lord that he always tries to bring us back home, back to Godhead. God is liberated and he tries to make us liberated, but although he is constantly trying, we refuse to accept his instructions. So that's what we have. We have to stop refusing to accept his instructions. Nonetheless, he has not become angry. Therefore, he is described here as unlimitedly merciful in delivering us from this miserable material condition of life and taking us back home, back to Godhead. So, and actually, right after Prabhupada says that, but we refuse to accept his instructions, he quotes Bhagavad-gītā 1866, sarvadhamam parityajya. But in general, refusing the instructions we're refusing to accept, in our case, it's the instructions of the spiritual master. We have to. There's one statement by Prabhupada: follow my instructions, even the little ones. Right? Even the little ones. So, we have to constantly be working at trying to follow the instructions of the spiritual master. And one of the instructions of the spiritual master is to preach. That's actually, sometimes we think of that as almost like an auxiliary activity, but it's actually sadhana. And I'm going to prove it. I'm going to read something that Prabhupada actually says as much. It's part of the sadhana. But first I'll give an example from the Chaitanya Charitamrita. There's that pastime where Lord Chaitanya was traveling through South India, and he came to this place. I think the village was actually named Kormashtan, and there's a Brahmin named Korma living there. And he was it's described, he had a pretty Krishna conscious family life. He was a devotee, his wife, children, everything was nice. But he wanted to he was very inspired by Lord Chaitanya, and he wanted to make further advancement, and he wanted to travel with Lord Chaitanya, so he could, for his spiritual life, for the benefit of his spiritual life. And Lord Chaitanya responded very interesting way. He said, no, not a good idea. He said, but rather you should just stay here, and wherever you go, whoever you meet, tell them about Krishna and the instructions of the Bhagavad-gītā. And then he went on to say, and if you do that, you'll never lose my association. We'll always be associated. See, so that was the instruction he gave him. He didn't tell him, yeah, good idea, come travel with me. No, he gave him additional, like a sadhana. This wasn't Lord Chaitanya speaking to Rupa Goswami or Sanatana Goswami. He was talking to somebody who was aspiring to make, advance more in their spiritual life, and that was the instruction he gave him. Preach. Wherever you go, whoever you meet, tell them about Krishna, and by doing that, you'll have my association always. So that's, that was then. And now, just in a lecture Prabhupada gave here, right here in Los Angeles, not this building, but 57 years ago, Prabhupada said this at the end of the lecture. He said, so try to spread this Krishna consciousness movement. This is your sadhana, execution of austerity, penance, because you have to meet so many opposing elements. You have to fight with them. That is tapasya. You are tolerating so much insult, so much botheration, so much inconvenience, personal discomfort, everything sacrificed, even money. Sounding pretty scary here, Whoa, do we really want to do this? But then Prabhupada goes on to say, but it will not go in vain. Rest assured, it will not go in vain. Krishna will reward you sufficiently. So go on executing this Krishna consciousness. Thank you very much. So that's, Prabhupada made that statement there, that this is sadhana. Preaching it's part of our sadhana. It's not an extracurricular activity. auxiliary. It's actually we should be thinking like this, part of the sadhana. And he acknowledges there's austerity involved, there's penance, there's opposing elements, there's insults, there's botheration, there's inconvenience, there's personal discomfort, losing money, but Prabhupada says, don't worry about it. Your efforts are not going to go in vain. Krishna will reward us sufficiently. So I'll end on that note. Does anybody have any question or comment? Ravindranath Prabhu. And then,
yeah, you mentioned about it's difficult to understand three-dimensional space in the universe. So I don't understand why it's so difficult. Could you explain that?
Yeah, no. I mean, we are experiencing three-dimensional space, but the space, according to Sariputta, and as I said, this book was printed by the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust. It's on the Veda base, so I'm assuming it's a bona fide book. His conclusions are bona fide. Otherwise, why would the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust print it? And it's on the Veda base, and I know, leading devotees have. They think he's got some good point. He's suggesting, or he's stating, that the space that we're dealing with in the Bhagavatam is implicitly not higher. It's higher dimensional. It's not three-dimensional space. He gives some examples. I can read an example here. He said, these ideas about space and its relation to sense perception are implicit in the Vedic literature, and they can be best understood by giving some specific examples. The nature of Krishna's absolute position is nicely illustrated by the following story of a visit by Lord Brahma to Krishna in Dwarka. In the story, Krishna first responds to Brahma's request to see him by having his secretary ask, "Which Brahma wishes to see me?" Brahma later begins his conversation with Krishna by asking why Krishna made this inquiry. And then he kind of gives the whole thing from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, that whole passage. And he says, in this story it is significant that each of the Brahmas remained within his own universe. This means that Krishna was simultaneously manifesting his Dwarka pastimes in all of those universes. Each Brahma, except ours, thought that he was alone with Krishna in Dwarka within his own universe. But by Krishna's grace, our Brahma could simultaneously see all the others. This illustrates that Krishna has access to all locations at once. And it also shows that by Krishna's grace, different living beings can be given different degrees of spatial access, either permanently or temporarily. Arjuna's vision of Krishna's universal form on the battlefield of Kṣetra is another example of Krishna's expanding the sensory powers of a living being and giving him access to regions of the universe previously unknown to him. And it goes on. But he gives another example, similar. Similar observations could be made about the incident in which Banasura used 1,000 arms to work 500 bows and shoot 2,000 arrows at a time at Krishna. In this case, we are dealing with a materially embodied being living on the earth. One might wonder how 500 material arms could be mounted on one shoulder without interfering with one another. If this is possible, how could they aim 500 bows in the same direction at once? Did the bows pass through each other? We suggest that stories of this kind implicitly require higher dimensional conceptions of space. So that's basically what he's suggesting, that the kind of things that are described in the Bhagavatam implicitly require higher dimensional conceptions of space. And I would agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm just thinking, is there any specific statements in the Vedic literature stating that this world is not three-dimensional? It seems like people are trying to speculate that it's not, but is there any actual statements in the Vedas saying that it's not three-dimensional? He uses the word, the reason he's using the word implicit is because it's not explicit. He's acknowledging, by saying that, he's acknowledging that there is no explicit statement to that effect, but from the description, from the context, we can understand that that must be the case. You want to help me out, Prabhu? Yeah. Shamachandra, Prabhu.
Yeah, so the space is an English word. So the Sanskrit word for space is akāsha. Mm-hmm. And the akāsha, according to the Vedic literature, it has three types. There is bhutakāsha, chidakāsha and chittakāsha. Bhutakasha means gross space, what we perceive with our mind. Three-dimensional space we can perceive. And Chittakasha means mental space. And Chidakasha means soul space. And these other two space cannot be understood by the human mind. And that is only can be understood by a yogi who has a yogi pratyaksha. Yogi pratyaksha is a special cognition a yogi develops to perceive higher things. So to pursue the other two spaces, Chidakasha and Chittakasha, a person needs to have the yogi pratyaksha siddhi. That is the Vedic explanation of space.
Yeah. He says something like that further on in the book. He goes, in this book we propose that the cosmological system of the Bhagavatam is a simplified description of the universe as it appears from the viewpoint of demigods, rishis, and highly elevated human beings who are the principal characters in this work. In contrast, our familiar conception of the earth globe is and it goes on. But that's the idea, that this is, the Bhagavatam is describing the universe as it's being experienced by demigods, rishis, yogis, and people, highly elevated spiritually beings. That makes sense to me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's there holding the universe. And Srila Prabhupada mentioned, and the Buddhist question, how come we cannot see it? But it's there.
Yeah, and Prabhupada gave the example. He said, you're like, in the conversation that he was having with the devotees who were asking, he said, you're like the bull. He's kind of, on the thing that they use to thresh the grains, he's attached. He's just going around and around because he's kind of on a rope. And he's going around and around, and he thinks he's going, but he's in the same place. He's restricted to that rotation there. And so Prabhupada was making the point that, as Prabhu said, you can't understand it. With your present senses and your level of consciousness, you can't understand it. But Krishna can reveal. Yeah.
It just isn't a principle of the subtle and gross, right? The gross has limitations that you can see, but the subtle, like the yogi, they can travel all the way, to the different heavenly planets. But that for us is inconceivable. But that's like on the subtle plane. And
Yeah.
and if unless you're qualified with that kind of yogic power, it's hard to understand that. How do you perceive it?
Yeah. I mean, Mount Sumeru, you kind of mentioned that. Mount Sumeru is, it's described in the Bhagavatam as being 2/3 of a million miles high, and the diameter at the top is 1/3 of a million miles, and it's shaped like an ice cream cone actually, and it's gold. It's big enough so that, we should be seeing it. It's not that far away. Something that big we'd be seeing, but it's in another dimension. I mean, we can't say this is mythology. It doesn't exist. It exists, but we don't see it because we don't have the senses to see it. But somebody like a yogi or somebody who's able to experience on that level would be able to perceive Mount Sumeru, but we can't. And that's basically. Anyway, you have to read the book. I'm not going to try to get in my head here. It's on the Veda base. If anybody's interested, they can, go there and read it. Thank you. Another. Okay, Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.